What's up, people? You know, ever since I would say about 2005, about that period of time, maybe '06, Ray Lewis has been my favorite player in the league, in the NFL, for, a variety of different reasons. The high level of play, the passion, just the all-around game that he brought to the Baltimore Ravens. He was the cover boy of my favorite Madden game to date, 2005. And he was just always the guy that I thought embodied what it meant to be an NFL player more than anyone else. And I've always been one of his biggest fans, and I've always rooted for him and his Ravens to do well. So now that he's gone, now that, the whole Super Bowl thing is officially done with, it's been done for a week and a half now, and it really settles in that football's over and Ray Lewis is retiring. There's I guess you could say, a Ray Lewis-sized hole in my heart, but not really, because he did leave the game at the highest possible level you can reach. He went out a Super Bowl champion, even though he did play terrible in that Super Bowl. I mean, it really can't be overstated rather, how bad he was in that game, but still, he went out a Super Bowl champion. He reached the top of the mountain before he went out. So I want to do a video series to see where Ray Lewis ranks in the history of great NFL defensive players. I want to evaluate his career against the careers of all the other greats. So I'm going to be taking as many videos as it takes to compare Ray Lewis to the other all-time defensive greats. And we'll see where he lands. Is he the best defensive player ever? Is he fourth? Is he seventh? Is he third? I think the only way to find out is to take a long look at the careers of his peers and see where he comes out. You can't just go off, oh, you remember Ray Lewis the best because he was just playing. Oh, you can't just say, oh, Ray Lewis was better than Reggie White because I don't remember watching Reggie White play, but I just saw Ray Lewis play 2 weeks ago. If you judge things based off that, you're never going to get anywhere productive. So we're going to take a nice long look at the careers of Ray Lewis compared to the other great NFL defensive players, and we will see where we wind up. And I'm going to be making a bunch of videos over the next couple weeks evaluating this, and let's see how Ray Lewis really stacks up. All right, we're going to start off with Ray Lewis's individual statistics. I have them up on the screen for you, but we'll talk through them real quick here. Ray Lewis, 17 seasons, 228 games, 2,050 tackles, 1,558 of them solo, 41 and a half sacks. He forced 19 fumbles. He recovered 19 fumbles, 31 career interceptions, 503 interception return yards, 3 picks returned for a touchdown, 119 passes defended. And these last two are complicated statistics. If you want to understand more about them, you can go to profootballreference.com. The short version is they basically try to assign a numerical value to every player for every season of their career on a scale of, I believe it's 1 to 23. And the higher the number is, the more valuable you were that season. So if you combine the approximate value of Ray Lewis for every year of his career, 222, and if you weight his approximate value according to which of his seasons were his best, 158. I'll get into what that really means a little later. So the average Ray Lewis season, he would give you 13 games, 121 tackles, 92 solo, 2.5 sacks, force a fumble, recover a fumble, pick off 2 passes, 30 interception return yards, 20% chance he was going to return a pick for a touchdown, and he would defend or deflect 7 passes for an approximate value of 13. And then you have his average game. Now, this is a little iffy because the nature of the way defensive players compile their stats mean you can't get a full picture of what Ray Lewis was really worth, but average game over his career, 9 tackles, 7 of them solo, 20% chance of a sack, 10% chance of a forced fumble. You kind of see where I'm getting at with all that. 50% chance that he would deflect a pass. So those are his individual regular season career statistics. All right, career playoff statistics. Ray Lewis has made the playoffs 9 times in his career and played a grand total of 21 games. In those games, he amassed 211 tackles, 132 solo, has 2 sacks, he forced 6 fumbles, had a fumble recovery, has 2 interceptions, has returned those interceptions for 54 total yards, and he has 1 interception returned for a touchdown. Also, 14 passes defended, giving him an average game performance of 10 tackles, with 6 of them being solo. And then you have a 10% chance he was going to have a sack, a 30% chance he was going to have a forced fumble, and so on. So pretty strong numbers for Ray Lewis in the postseason when compared to what he did in regular games. All right, and now we have team success, because what's it all worth if you're not helping your team win? So I think I said earlier, 228 career games for Ray Lewis over 17 seasons, 127 wins, 100 losses, and 1 tie. That gives him a winning percentage of 56%. And we'll see how that compares to some of the other greats in a little bit. Playoff success. Like I said earlier, 9 times in the postseason, 14 wins, 7 losses, for a 67 winning percentage. That's pretty strong. All right, defensive team ranks, because ultimately that's what we want to know about our defensive heroes. How good were the defenses that they led? So, over his career, we'll look at points first, and then we'll go to yards. Points, obviously, the thing that matters the most in terms of winning and losing games. Ray Lewis has led the #1 defense in the league twice, 2000, 2006. He's led a top 5 defense 7 times in his career. You can see that up on the screen. He's led a top 10 defense, that would be 11 times. He has led a defense that was in the bottom half of the league 4 times. And if you look at that, you'll see that 2 of those times were in the first 2 years of his career. And Ray Lewis obviously came into the league on what was basically an expansion franchise. I mean, they moved from Cleveland. They needed a few years to find themselves, so of course they were bad. I mean, Ray Lewis was on the worst defense in the league in '96. I don't think that says anything about him. I think that says everything about the Ravens at that point in time when they were a brand new franchise. So, you can let him off the hook a little bit for that stuff. And if you add it all together and average it, I know this is an imperfect science, but his average defensive rank over his career was 9th in the league. And he played most of his career with either 31 or 32 teams in the league. So we'll see how that compares. Yards, #1 defense, he led that once in 2006. In terms of yards, he led a top 5 defense 9 times, that's pretty incredible. That's over half of his career, and he led a top 5 defense in all of those 9 seasons. Had a top 10 defense 12 times in his career, and all the other times, the other 5 seasons, he led a defense that was in the bottom half of the league. Once again, you average it all out, and his average defensive ranks in terms of yards was 9th. So that seems pretty strong, but we'll see how it stacks up to the other greats. All right, career accolades, because that's always a good measure of how good these players are. Ray Lewis, 13 Pro Bowls. You can look it up right there, see all the years he made it. First team All-Pro 7 times, second team All-Pro 3 times. He was the NFL Defensive Player of the Year by the Associated Press twice, 2000 and 2003. The AFC Defensive Player of the Year 3 times. The NFL Alumni Linebacker of the Year twice. He was a 2-time AFC champion, and both the times he was an AFC champion, he also became a Super Bowl champion a couple weeks later. And he has 1 Super Bowl MVP, and we'll see in a little bit that Super Bowl MVP puts him in some pretty rarefied territory and does a lot for him historically. Statistically, tackles are an unofficial stat, which is one reason why it's really hard to compare defensive players, because even today, tackle statistics are very iffy. But By most accounts, Ray Lewis has the most tackles in NFL history, his 2,050. According to most sources that I've found, the only two players in NFL history with 2,000 tackles are Ray Lewis and Junior Seau. And some people say like Zach Thomas maybe, but most people can generally agree on that. Most Pro Bowls ever made by an inside linebacker in NFL history, most All-Pro selections for an inside linebacker in NFL history, and he has the most games started for an inside linebacker in NFL history. Uh, Little stat here, number one, most interception return yards by an inside linebacker in NFL history. He became the fastest player to accumulate a total of 20 sacks and 20 interceptions. Took him 113 games. He got to 30 sacks and 30 interceptions in 204 games, and he is the only player in NFL history to amass 40 sacks and 30 interceptions. I had talked about approximate value a little earlier. Again, I'm not going to go too deep into it right now, but his approximate value is good for fifth all time among all players, not just defensive players in NFL history. And if you take weighting into account, he is fourth. Wow. All right, best season, peak season, when Ray Lewis was at the peak of his powers, it's got to be the year 2000. I mean, what other year could it be? 136 tackles, 107 of them solo, 3 sacks, he recovered 3 fumbles, had 2 picks, deflected 6 passes, 23 approximate value. That's almost as high as it goes, I believe. That's one of the great all-time defensive seasons. Average game, 9 tackles, 20% chance of a sack, 40% chance of a pass deflection. You see what I'm getting at with those percentage numbers there. And the defense that he led that year was the best defense in the league in terms of points. You can see 10.3 points per game, and the second best defense in yards, 248 yards a game. Now the Ravens made the playoffs, and we have 31 tackles in that postseason run, a fumble recovery, 2 interceptions, 54 interception return yards. So he had all of his interception-related postseason action in this one postseason. 1 pick return for a touchdown, 8 passes defended. He was very active defending the pass in this postseason. 8 tackles per game on average, 50% chance he was going to be involved in an interception, 2 passes defended per game that postseason, which is pretty incredible for a middle linebacker. And of course, that ended in their Super Bowl victory. And you can see number one defense in points that postseason, giving up less than 6 points a game. And it was actually more like 4 a game because they did give up that special teams touchdown in the Super Bowl, and the number one defense that postseason in yards, 225 a game. That's just crazy, even for a defense as great as that one was. Okay, here we have the best games of Ray Lewis's career. I picked out ones that really stood out in terms of his individual performance as well as the performance of the team. So 2002, he played the Denver Broncos, 18 tackles, 1 interception, 2 passes defended in a 34-23 victory. 2003, he played the San Francisco 49ers midway through the season, 18 tackles, 14 solo, an interception, 29 interception return yards, and a 44-6 victory. And just this last year, actually, even as an old man getting it done against the Cincinnati Bengals, that was actually week 1 this season, 14 tackles, 11 solo, a sack, and a forced fumble in a 44-13 victory. So those are some of his trademark regular season games. Now let's look at his postseason games. 2001, so this was from his Super Bowl run from the 2000 regular season, plays at Tennessee, the Tennessee Titans, 12 tackles, and he ends the game with an interception that he takes away from Eddie George, returns 50 yards for the game-sealing touchdown, 24-10. What other game could possibly be the game of Ray Lewis's career? You know, a pick six to seal a playoff game. And a few years ago, 2010, he played the New England Patriots, 13 tackles in that game, and he had a sack of Tom Brady in a 33-14 victory. So those are the games that I think best define what Ray Lewis was all about.